Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you again for another week and another episode of the 247 Real Talk podcast. I hope you had a great week as we embark on another week of topics and as we get closer to the end of summer. This past week, I was speaking with someone who always says, I'm living my best life. And for some reason, this time around, they really made me ponder what that means. So when I come back, we're going to talk about maybe three major things. What is living our best life? Can we live our best life? And how do we go about living our best life? I'll be right back. So welcome back to the 247 Real Talk podcast. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm your host, Julian Perry. And this week we're going to talk about, let me talk about the studio for a little bit. You might notice, if you pay real attention, you'll notice some upgrades in the studio. Even my mic arm is an upgraded arm. I talked about in a few episodes of having a monitor, a touch screen in front of me so I can go through some information and chat with you about it, at my fingertips. That's now in place. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there to a point where I can be really comfortable and have these conversations with you in an easier way and a more informative way. So let's talk about the topic that I mentioned before. When you think about living your best life, what is that? And then when you think about what it is, can you actually do it? And then once you figure you do it, how do you go about doing it? So I think the reason I really ponder this was because, like I said, someone keeps saying to me, I'm living my best life. But when I look at their environment from my perspective, I notice a few things. One of those things is that person is living their best life at the expense of others. So really and truly, what I broke that down to me is that's not living their best life. That's living their own selfishness. Your best life has to be not only what's good for you, this is my definition, but good for the people around you. It has to be not only about gaining for you, like if you like to travel, then you travel and you really don't care what happens to the people around you in terms of finances. And I'm thinking about this specific situation where, that's this situation where you can leave loved ones uncared for, elderly ones, parents uncared for, because you want to hop on a plane and go, and you figure, I'm not going to let them hold me back. For me, that's not living your best life because you got what you wanted. That is living a selfish life. So what is living your best life? And as I was doing I was thinking and I was sort of doing my internal research, because this is a self-reflection topic, right? Something popped up on my phone. And so I copied it and I have it here on my screen. It's a quote from Warren Buffett, his advice. And he uses advice to avoid making major mistakes, but I think it's relevant to living your best life. He says, write your obituary and figure out how to live up to it. I'm going to read that again. Write your obituary and figure out how to live up to it. Now think about that for a second. Your obituary is what you would want people to say about how you lived your life. Who you were to the people who were around you, who counted on you, who interacted with you, who befriended you, who needed you, who met you in passing for one moment in time, how did all those relationships and those interactions go? When you think about how you want to be remembered, is it more about Julian went flying all over the world and did his own thing and, never really paid attention to family, but he was always smiling, always traveling, living his best life? Is that really living your best life? Again, I think there's a thin line between living your best life and living your most selfish life. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's really dig into this, because this may sound like just a surface, superficial topic, but it's not. The first question we have to ask as people in this environment, minorities and people in general who are dealing with challenges of life, both society created and life created. Can we live our best lives? And for us to say that, let's define what is your best life. And it's a hard question to answer if you really put a deep thought into it. I sit here every week and I record an episode, and I really try to get intimate with the topic and try to be as open and honest and as caring, as empathetic, and as truthful as I can, as my knowledge allows, I should say. Part of what I do here in this podcast, to all of you who are listening, the audio podcast, and those of you who have so graciously supported me on YouTube, is part of what I would add into the mixture of living my best life. I enjoy speaking with you because I believe that the mind is a terrible thing to waste, and opening up and having these conversations can only result in us figuring things out to live a better life. But I also get a satisfaction from it because, number one, I'm sharing of myself, and number two, I'm trying really hard to do my part to help people I know, people I don't know, people I've never met, and maybe pay it forward to an extent that if I don't get everything accomplished before I leave this place, that what I have ingrained into the minds of others and into our society will serve as a tool for someone else to keep the conversation, the effort, the movement going. As I think about living my best life, it's about my family too. It's about my children. It's about the love I have for them. It's about protecting them. It's about sometimes being overprotective with them. It's about my spouse and living and sharing a space each and every day and making an extra effort to make sure that all our interactions are I won't say all our interactions are meaningful, because that's kind of impossible, but that I'm thoughtful with all our interactions so that I don't interject unnecessary noise into our relationship. And this is something that I've grown with, okay? When I say grown with, I've grown to become. When you talk about living your best life, if you happen to be in a relationship, if you happen to be married, if you happen to have children, conflict is part of that dynamic. Disagreement is part of that dynamic. Struggles are part of that dynamic. How you deal with it make a big difference in terms of how your life goes every day. How much of your days are happy and how much of your days are a struggle. And I speak from experience. I would honestly say that my wife has taught me a lot. And other strengths that I have and abilities to observe, and most of all, being directed by the Almighty God. Yes, I'm a spiritual man, and that is who I am. But it has allowed me to grow, to discern, to feel, and it's an ongoing process. But the beauty of that process in a relationship is growing towards, as long as you're putting the right foot forward, the meaning foot forward, the purposeful foot forward, is growing closer and closer to living your best life. there's the economic factor, right? And that's a big one. When you don't have money and you have a family, when you have to stand as a breadwinner, as a man, as someone who is, I'm old school, as you can say. My father is going to be 92 years old in his next birthday, so you can understand, I'm old school. When you struggle financially and you get to the point where you have a family and you watch your kids not have. Now, many of us grew up with not everything. We didn't grow up in rich families with money to splurge. Many of us grew up in families where, in our generation, our time now, we kind of have it better than they did in some instances. The point being is, how do you live your best life? When you look at your children, when you look at your household, when you look at the bills and the struggles that society has oppressed you with. And when I say oppressed you with, understand something. For all of us, rich, poor, whatever race, creed, or color, there are oppressive things that are inherent in our society. Things like inflation. Things like, when the job market crashes, when the stock market crashes, and layoffs, and a bad economy. What you need to understand is all of those things are man-made. Okay? God didn't create market crashes. There are men, human beings, who have learned to manipulate finances for greed. If you think about it, there are people who, in the worst financial times of this country and this world, have made tremendous amounts of money. So when you talk about whether you have a family, even if you're single, and your desire is to live a certain way, and you're struggling to do that because of these dynamics, these oppressive dynamics that you have no control over are altering your path. How do you live your best life? Think about what I've spoken about many, many times here on this podcast. Minorities, or let's say people of color, who've been subjected to earning less, who've been subjected to neighborhoods that have been created to oppress them, we go back to it, upcoming student loans, who have to find a way now to take money from monies they don't have to pay back for an education that's not worth the paper it's printed on, and they don't see that seems to bring them no progress when they're out in the market looking for a job, because they're not judged, as Martin Luther King said, by the content of the character. They're judged by the color of their skin. So how many people actually get to live their best life? So I think when we ask, can we live our best life? It's very important how we define it and what things become the meaningful part of us living our best life. If living your best life means love, then you can love someone even in the worst of times. Your kids, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, even when you're struggling, you can love. If living your best life means helping others, you can do that in the worst of times, in between the storms, because helping others is not just a monetary thing. Helping others is exactly what we are doing for each other in this podcast. Helping others is listening to someone when they need to exhale. Helping others is giving them a kind word. Helping others is walking down the street and someone asks you for directions and actually saying, I'm in a hurry, but I can take 2 seconds to help them because maybe they're hurrying for a job interview and they're lost. Helping others is not prejudging people by their appearance or making assumptions, but treating people not only how you would like to be treated, but treating people with an open mind and a heart of kindness. Now, do not get me wrong. There are many scenarios where kind people have been hurt, even killed, and their loss of life was a part of an act of kindness. And that's hard to swallow. And that's hard to understand. That's hard to even say, well, how do we deal with that? It's like I found myself recently watching a few court cases, replays of court cases of murder. I'm watching families say, I forgive you. You murdered my daughter. I think it was about 2 or 3 mornings ago, I was walking to work after I got off the railroad, and I was listening to 1010 Winds, and they were talking about some gentleman whose daughter had been murdered. I think it was vehicular manslaughter. And he says, I forgive you. The guy who killed her was way, way, way over the legal alcohol limit. And he said, I forgive you. Now, I don't know if all these people who actually say, I forgive you, actually forgive. But I think I've learned that forgiveness is a powerful tool of removing a burden off of yourself. Forgiving someone is not about the person, it's about you. And I was thinking to myself, what that person just accomplished, if it was genuine, was part of living their best life, being the best them they could be. It is a difficult challenge considering that when we put all the things that happen to us in life, all the unfair things that can happen to us, it's hard to live a best life where it's about others and about service and about selflessness. If it's about traveling the world, you can accomplish that. But is that really your best life? Again, I think the line just skewed between living a best life and living a selfish life, a self-serving life. Service, not to others, not self-serving, to me is part of what the makeup of human beings, who we were designed to be. And it, to me at least, and then remember, in this whole conversation, we're talking about my thoughts. You living your best life might be quite different. Let's talk about you for a second. Maybe you're living your best life is to have a family, to watch your kids grow, to support them the best they can, to provide the best you can, to be a part of your church and your community, to serve, and you've accomplished what you feel is your best life. Maybe someone else who's listening to me, their best life is to become some professional in the medical field where they can inject themselves into an environment to save lives. People who come into hospitals hurt, people who are sick, people who are struggling, people who are suffering. And that's their life mission. And when they get to the point where they find themselves in a medical institution actually saving lives, maybe to them that's living their best life. Maybe living your best life is becoming a public servant and becoming a part of social services that helps people like migrants and homeless and abused women and abused partners and abused children. Some people go into working with ACS, right, Agency for Child Services, because they want to help children. Maybe living your best life is having a career as a teacher while taking care of your family, while watching them grow, while being blessed enough to live long enough to see your children get married and enjoy your grandchildren. But I think that this whole conversation becomes critical when we really think about life and where we're going. And I'm going back to my experience. I often say these days, where have the years gone? I lived a lot of my early life without a purpose, without a definition of living my best life. And what I feel at times when I look back is how much of my life I lived without focus or purpose. When I say without focus and purpose, yes, I went to college, yes, I got a bachelor's, I got 2 masters, I got all those accomplishments. But as I get older, I realize we tend to tell our children and sort of condition our children and force them into the direction of education. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's not for everyone. And I'm saying that along that journey, I grew up in a time where it was all about your parents would tell you, you got to study. It's about your books. You come home from school, you get something to eat, get to your books, study all evening. Okay, go brush your teeth. Okay, do some more study. Okay, go to your bed or wake up in the morning, go to school, come home, study. Or go to after school lessons if you're weak in a certain subject. And And it's all about that. And there are some people that have become so conditioned, and I was one of them, that my focus was tunnel vision. And I never even contemplated, am I happy, really happy? Am I living my best life? I've dealt with a lot of issues from others in my life in this, especially when I've lived in the United States. I've dealt with blatant racism. I think I had an episode where I spoke about that. I'm not going to bring it back up now, but I've dealt with that. I've dealt with a lot of prejudice on jobs, even though not only did I put my best foot forward, but it was evident that my work was outstanding, but my color wasn't. These things tend to beat you down. I've dealt with bad relationships. I've dealt with betrayal. And when these things happen to you, you get your internal mechanisms put you in a place of anger, maybe even for a moment, hatred. In my life, I've found that the most influential, the most critical foundation of living my best life has been my relationship with Jesus Christ. For those who don't go in that direction, I always say to people, I am not here to tell you to believe or not. That's between you and God. But at least if you are a person who reads maybe self-help books, the Bible is certainly one heck of a book to read that's going to help you live your best life. As I grew older, as I want to say Christ grabbed me when I was out of control, and as I had an enlightening of what was going on in my life, and as I voluntarily turned into that direction, I began to see a lot of things come together in my life, and my focus changed. The person you see before you today asking you about your best life and sharing with you that a life of service and helping others brings such inherent joy and peace. A life of activism for the right cause brings us a sense of fulfillment. A life of making a sacrifice to help someone else brings back such rewards and happiness, and in a world of whether you want to call it blessings or karma, a lot of good comes back to you, and maybe a lot of those struggles that you were having, even financially, become a blessed situation. How many times have you received a job, a promotion, a raise, money out of somewhere that you didn't even try for, and in many times you didn't even deserve? I have. I have gone through periods of drought, and I kept saying, Lord, what's going on? And I can promise you, I would often sing that song, open the floodgates of heaven and let it rain. And I have seen it rain. I've seen seasons of rain many times in my life. So much so that if it rained anymore, it'd be a flood. And I've gone through periods of drought, and when I've looked at them, they were either by my own doing, or as in hindsight, I could see they were preparation for the next flood of rain. The bottom line is, whatever you choose to believe in, understand that this journey of life is one time. Even for those of you who believe in reincarnation, I seriously doubt you will remember, if that ever existed, who you were in your last life. So this journey, who you know yourself to be, who you know the people around you to be, your loved ones, the people you interact with every day, is a one-time shot. For as long as you're breathing, for as long as you're living, every single day you should go out with a purpose. And I'm not talking about a purpose that brings you heaviness or such deep thought that it changes your mood and your happiness. I'm talking about a purpose of serving, a purpose of helping, a purpose of lightness and freedom. And once you go out with that purpose, when you see opportunities to serve and help, it will become natural for you to do so. You won't have to think, should I help this person? You will automatically go towards it. However long you live, I want to think that even the people who died serving and helping someone are receiving such a blessing right now that if they could come back and tell you, they'll probably say, I'll do it again. Is your purpose in life to become so filthy rich that you can buy all the material things of the world? Do you think that when you leave here, any of that will matter? There are many people, and I want to make this point, as I thought about celebrities, as I thought about, and I say celebrities because of the financial attachment to that, right? And as I thought about so many who have committed suicide, I think back, and I don't want to call names of some of the actors and celebrities because I don't want to bring them in a negative light, but the point is, we in society looked at them and said they smiled every day. They were comical, they were laughing, they were full of energy, they were full of joy. And yet behind that, they killed themselves. They took their own lives. So what you should understand is behind that facade, there was such unhappiness. There was such sadness. And I want to believe that part of that, or the reason for that, is because they lost track of their purpose. Or their purpose was not a purpose that would lead to a happy life. And they found themselves in a place of darkness, struggling with the things that we all struggle with, and struggling with things that beyond what we struggle with. Because remember, with money and fame come a lot of other things. We think that living our best life is being rich and having all these things, and then we find out we actually ended up living our worst life. For those celebrities who make a lot of money and who freely give of that money, they seem a lot of times happier than the ones we hear about who are filthy rich and either end their life tragically, or we find out after they leave here of all the turmoil in their lives. My point is, living your best life is not about material things. Living your best life is about focusing on what happiness is really about. If you like to travel, then that's part of your best life. But it cannot be the only part, and it cannot be done in a way that is to the expense of others, that hurts others. Whatever you do in your best life, try to do it where you consider those around you, those who will be impacted, so that when whatever you do on that journey, you bring joy to the people around you and the people you uplift. This is important because if you remember my previous episodes, I talked about mental health and I talked about lifestyle. All these episodes are connected because when you have mastered living your best life and you understand how much giving and sharing and loving brings you such joy, that will be a lifestyle that will bring you health, peace, happiness, and in many cases, unimaginable wealth, both materialistic and in your heart. So I wanted to have one of these kind of heart-to-hearts with you. And I think it's important because we're living in a time where we're still grappling. We're coming out of COVID. We're living in a time where we have such political turmoil and hatred. We're living in a time where racism and prejudice has reared its head to a whole new level in this country. For those of you who've been paying attention to the news, there was an incident, I think, in Alabama earlier this week. And it was it has to be a race-motivated incident. At least that's the way we see it, okay, from the videos we saw. And in a place where civil rights is such a powerful thing, many people spoke with me about it, and their take on it made them feel that this was significant in a place like Alabama. So my point is, whatever you do it for the best of others. Recognize that things like prejudice and hate have no place in life. People who are in the political spectrum, who are doing most dishonorable and most unimaginable things to keep power and to hurt each other. They've forgotten their oath of service, which if they carried out their oath, they'd likely be living their best life. On this episode, as I end it tonight, again, I want to appeal to you to think about your purpose every day. And when you've figured it out and how to get there, share it with someone else so they can figure it out too. There are a lot of things in this life and in this world that exist around us that we have very little control over, that make every effort to oppress us. I often hear people say that life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you respond. Again, I ask you to join me in the conversation, join me in the effort, make it a part of your mission to be a part of this movement and this mission, to help others, to change lives, to take the time when people are struggling to listen and to share, to have a kind word instead of an abrupt word. We all make mistakes and we all do it. But there's a very powerful experience when you recognize your mistake and you live every day purposefully, step by step, in a meaningful way to change the negatives to positives, to change your life, to bring more happiness into your heart and the hearts of others around you. On this episode, I want to end with a prayer. It's a prayer that I have a pastor, my pastor, who sends prayers every morning, Monday through Saturday at least. And this one was significant to me as I thought about this episode, and I want to read it to you really quickly. It says, Lord Jesus, as I walk the path of life today, let my eyes be your eyes, sharing compassion, warmth, and love. Let my hands be your hands, bringing healing with their touch. Let my ears be your ears, listening where there is need. Let my words be your words, bringing comfort, joy, and peace. Let my spirit be filled with passion and joy, so that I might see the opportunity and blessing in every moment of the day. Let my mind be activated so that I can process and discern the synchronistic events and actions which lead to success and well-being. Let my day be expansive and beautiful, expressing the creative presence and power of God. Let this be my prayer today. In Jesus' name, amen. I leave you with that prayer and that message from the Almighty. Please have an amazing week ahead. Make one step closer and one step forward towards living your best life. Until we chat again, take care of yourselves and each other.